Far beneath the places where roots reach and rivers run, beneath the layered sediment of 10,000 centuries, compressed into ribbons of ochre and iron and pale, sleeping limestone, there exists a silence so complete that it becomes its own kind of sound, a deep and resonant hum that seems to emanate from the bones of the world itself, as though the planet were singing to itself in a register too low for waking ears to comprehend, a lullaby composed not of notes, but of pressure, of warmth, of the slow and patient weight of all the stone that has ever been. You can feel it before you hear it, this silence. Feel it settling over your shoulders like a mantle woven from darkness and from time, and if you allow yourself to be still, truly still, the way the deepest caverns have always been still, you will notice that the silence is not empty at all but full, brimming with the accumulated quiet of millennia, with the soft exhalations of mineral and moisture, and the imperceptible creaking of tectonic plates shifting in their ancient, unhurried dance. The air here is thicker than any air you have known, warm and close and faintly sweet, with the scent of wet stone and dissolved calcium, and it wraps around you the way the ocean wraps around a diver who has stopped swimming and simply allowed themselves to float, suspended in a medium that holds and cradles and asks nothing in return. And somewhere far above, so far above that it might as well be another world entirely, another lifetime, another dream, the sun is setting or rising or hanging motionless at noon. But none of that matters here. None of it reaches, because you have descended past the realm of light and weather and the counting of hours into a place where time itself has pooled like dark water in a hollow, still and deep and patient beyond all reckoning. The passage downward began hours ago, or perhaps days, or perhaps it began the moment you first closed your eyes tonight and felt the weight of the waking world begin to loosen its grip on your thoughts, because the descent into the deep earth and the descent into sleep share something essential, something the ancients understood when they carved their prayers into cave walls by the light of animal fat lamps that flickered like small orange spirits against stone that had never known illumination. Each step carried you lower through corridors of living rock where the walls glistened with a thin film of moisture, each bead of water a tiny, perfect lens reflecting nothing, holding nothing, simply existing in its slow journey from the surface to the center, a pilgrimage of molecules that might take 1,000 years to complete. The stone beneath your feet changed as you descended, from the rough, fractured granite of the upper chambers, where the memory of earthquakes still lingered in jagged seams, to the smoother, rounder passages where water had worked its patient artistry for epochs beyond counting, polishing the floor into something that felt almost soft beneath your weight, almost welcoming, as though the mountain itself had anticipated your arrival and prepared a path. And with each downward step, the temperature rose by the smallest conceivable increment, a warmth so gradual that you could not have said when the cool of the surface gave way to this gentle, enveloping heat, only that at some point you noticed your breathing had slowed and your muscles had begun to release their tension, as though the warmth of the earth's interior were reaching up through the stone to cradle you the way the deep ocean cradles the seafloor, utterly, completely, without reservation or end. There is a chamber here, impossibly far below the world you know, a chamber so vast that when you first entered it, you could not perceive its walls or ceiling, only the sensation of space opening outward in every direction, like a breath held and then released, like the moment between one wave and the next, when the entire ocean seems to pause and gather itself before rolling forward again. The darkness in this place is not merely the absence of light, but a positive presence, a substance as real and tangible as water, and it presses gently against your skin with a warmth that feels almost like affection, almost like the darkness itself is alive and aware, and has been waiting with the patience of geology for someone to arrive and simply be held. Your eyes, deprived of any photon, any stray glimmer, any distant reflection, have begun their quiet rebellion against emptiness. The visual cortex, that ancient and restless painter, has taken up its brushes and begun to create light where none exists, conjuring pale phosphins that drift across your field of vision like luminous jellyfish in the deepest trenches of the sea, soft blooms of violet and teal and a blue so faint it might be the memory of blue rather than the color itself. These phantom lights pulse and shift with the rhythm of your own heartbeat, and if you watch them without grasping, without trying to hold or name them, they become a kind of aurora, a private northern lights display staged in the theater of your own perception, and the effect is not unsettling, but deeply, profoundly soothing, as though the darkness were offering you a gift, a reminder that even in the complete absence of external light, you carry illumination within you, have always carried it, the way the earth carries its molten heart beneath miles and miles of patient, sheltering stone. The walls of the great chamber, when you reach out to touch them, are warm, not the warmth of a hearthstone or a sun-baked wall, but a deeper warmth, an older warmth, the kind of heat that has been building since the planet first coalesced from a cloud of cosmic dust 4.5 billion years ago, and the stone seems to pulse faintly beneath your fingertips, not with any motion you could measure or name, but with the suggestion of motion, the intimation of breath, as though the mountain were a sleeping creature of such incomprehensible size that you could rest your palm against its flank for a century and still not feel the full cycle of a single inhalation. The texture of the rock is extraordinary, smooth in places where the water has worked its millennia of careful polishing, rough in others where crystals of calcite and quartz have grown outward in tiny forests of mineral geometry, each crystal face catching the phantom light of your own hallucinating eyes and scattering it into soft imaginary rainbows that dissolve the moment you try to look directly at them. Moisture seeps from invisible fissures in the stone, gathering in droplets that swell with excruciating slowness until they reach the precise weight at which gravity overcomes surface tension. And then they fall, each drop a small, perfect event in the otherwise unbroken stillness, each impact sending a ripple of sound outward through the darkness that your ears receive, as something halfway between music and mathematics, a tone so pure and so fleeting that it seems to originate not from the physical world, but from some deeper, more fundamental layer of reality, where all sounds are one sound and all silences are one silence, and the echo of each drop travels outward through the chamber in expanding circles, like ripples on a dark and boundless ocean, touching the distant walls and returning transformed, softer, rounder, until the original sound and its reflections merge into a single sustained hum that hangs in the warm air like a chord played on an instrument carved from the mountain itself. You find a place to rest, a natural ledge where the stone has formed a shallow depression, as though the rock remembered the shape of a body that lay here once, long ago, in some earlier age of the world, or as though the earth itself had sculpted this small alcove in anticipation of this exact moment, this exact weariness, this exact need to simply stop and be still and allow the warmth to do its ancient work. The stone is heated to the precise temperature of comfort, the temperature at which the boundary between your body and the surface beneath you begins to blur, where you can no longer quite tell where your skin ends and the mineral world begins. And this dissolution of edges is not alarming but deeply restful, as though the earth were inviting you to remember that you are, in the most fundamental sense, made of the same materials. The calcium in your bones, drawn from the same cosmic forge that produced the limestone cradling you now, the iron in your blood born in the heart of a star that died long before this planet existed. You settle into the warm stone the way a river settles into its bed, the way a wave settles back into the body of the ocean after spending its brief luminous moment against the shore, and the weight of your limbs becomes not a burden but a gift, a gentle anchor holding you in this place of warmth and darkness and the slow percussion of falling water, each part of you growing heavier and more peaceful with every breath, every heartbeat, every soft and distant drop. In the silence between drops, you become aware of the rock breathing, not breathing the way you breathe, with the quick and hungry rhythm of lungs seeking oxygen, but breathing the way mountains breathe, the way continents breathe, with an inhalation that might last 10,000 years and an exhalation that spans an ice age, a respiration so slow and so vast that it can only be perceived by those who have let go of the human measurement of time and allowed themselves to sink into the geological, the oceanic, the eternal. The breath of the stone manifests as a barely perceptible change in air pressure, a gentle pulsing that you feel more in your chest than in your ears, a rhythm that gradually synchronizes with your own breathing until you cannot tell whether you are matching the mountain's pace or the mountain is matching yours. And this ambiguity is itself a kind of peace, a dissolution of the boundary between the one who breathes and the breath itself, between the sleeper and the sleep, between the dreamer and the dream. The moisture on the walls responds to this great slow breathing, the tiny beads of water swelling and contracting in unison like a chorus of luminous cells on the skin of some vast and gentle organism. And if you could see them, truly see them, with eyes adapted to a darkness deeper than any ocean trench, you would perceive the walls glittering with what looked like a field of stars, each droplet a small universe reflecting the phantom light of your own visual cortex back at you in an endless feedback loop of imagined illumination. And you lie here, cradled in the warm palm of the earth, breathing with the mountain, dreaming with the stone, held safely within something so enormous and so old that the concept of danger simply does not apply, has never applied, because this place existed before the first fear was felt by the first creature capable of feeling, and it will continue to exist long after fear itself has been forgotten, dissolved back into the bedrock of being like water returning to the sea. Somewhere in the passages above, in the transitional zones where the deep warmth of the interior begins to mingle with the cooler currents descending from the surface, there are formations that have been growing since before the first human walked upright. Stalactites and stalagmites reaching toward each other with a patience that defies comprehension, each one adding a fraction of a millimeter per century. Each ring of deposited mineral a record of a year's worth of water chemistry, a year's worth of rainfall far above, a year's worth of seasons turning in a world that these formations have never seen and never will. Some of them have finally met after hundreds of thousands of years of slow and faithful reaching, fusing into columns that span from floor to ceiling like the pillars of a cathedral designed by time itself. And the water still runs down their surfaces in thin, glistening films, still depositing its microscopic cargo of dissolved limestone, still building, still growing, still adding to the record with a diligence that makes the most patient human endeavor seem rushed and careless by comparison. The sound of water moving over these formations is the sound of deep time made audible, a whisper, a murmur, a soft and ceaseless susurration that weaves through the passages like a lullaby sung in a language older than language. And if you listen, if you truly listen with the whole of your being rather than merely with your ears, you can hear in that whisper the story of every raindrop that ever fell on the mountain above, every snowflake that ever settled on its peak, every morning fog that ever wrapped its gray arms around the slopes and released its moisture into the soil, beginning the long, slow, inevitable journey downward into the dark. The water knows the way, has always known the way, following the pull of gravity through fissures and fractures and the microscopic spaces between grains of rock with the same blind, perfect certainty with which a wave knows to return to the shore, with which a river knows to seek the sea. And you can trust this knowing the way you trust the ground beneath you, the way you trust the darkness to hold its shape around you, the way you trust that sleep will come if you simply stop resisting it and allow yourself to be carried. Each droplet that falls from the ceiling of the great chamber carries within it the memory of the sky, the memory of evaporation, of rising, of condensation, of the brief and brilliant moment of falling as rain through open air. But those memories grow fainter with each century of underground travel, each passage through mineral and stone, stripping away one more layer of surface identity, until what remains is something elemental, something that has forgotten what it means to be a cloud or a river and remembers only what it means to be water, to be the universal solvent, the patient sculptor, the medium through which all life flows. And this forgetting is not a loss, but a kind of liberation, a return to essence, and you feel something similar happening in your own mind as you lie here in the warm darkness, the details of the day above growing softer and more distant, the names and faces and obligations losing their sharp edges, dissolving like salt in warm water, until what remains is simply awareness, simply presence, simply the gentle, rhythmic fact of being alive and breathing and held. There are pools in this deep place, pools of water so clear and so still that they seem less like liquid than like windows into another dimension. Panes of transparent warmth through which you could, if you wished, see down into passages that descend even further, into chambers that no human has ever entered, and perhaps no human ever will. Rooms where the darkness is even more complete, the silence even more absolute, the warmth even closer to the molten source from which all this heat radiates upward through the patient medium of stone. The surface of these pools is as smooth as polished glass, undisturbed by any current, any wind, any ripple, and when a drop falls from the ceiling, that soft, inevitable percussion, the concentric circles spread outward with a perfection that would make a mathematician weep, each ring expanding at precisely the rate dictated by surface tension and gravity and the temperature of the water and the composition of the dissolved minerals, a calculation so complex that no human mind could perform it, and yet the water performs it effortlessly, instinctively, the way your heart beats without being told, the way your lungs breathe without being reminded, the way sleep arrives without being summoned when the conditions are right and the resistance is gone. The temperature of these pools is blood warm, exactly the temperature at which the boundary between the water and your body would disappear if you were to slip into their embrace, and the minerals dissolved within them, calcium and magnesium and trace elements drawn from 100 different strata of rock, would coat your skin in a thin film of dissolved earth, anointing you with the substance of the planet itself, marking you as one who has descended far enough to be claimed by the deep. And the pools reflect nothing, because there is no light to reflect, but they hold everything. They hold the record of every drop that has ever joined them, every mineral that has ever dissolved into their warmth, every vibration that has ever passed through the stone, and set their surfaces trembling with a motion too small to see. And in this way, they are like the ocean itself, the great and ancient ocean from which all life emerged, and to which all water eventually returns, patient and deep and full beyond measure. You have been here for what might be minutes or might be millennia. The distinction has ceased to matter in the way that the distinction between one wave and another ceases to matter when you are floating in open water, when the rhythm of rise and fall has become your rhythm, and you are no longer a separate thing moving through a medium, but part of the medium itself, part of the rise, part of the fall, part of the eternal oscillation between crest and trough that the ocean has been performing since the first waters condensed on the cooling surface of a planet still red with the heat of its own formation. The phantom lights behind your eyes have settled into a slow, steady pulsation, a gentle tide of luminescence that rises and recedes in perfect synchrony with your breathing. And you have stopped trying to see anything, and have instead surrendered to the darkness the way you might surrender to the ocean, allowing it to support you, to carry you, to rock you with its subtle ancient currents. The warmth of the stone beneath you has become indistinguishable from the warmth of your own body, and you lie in this state of thermal equilibrium like a stone yourself, like a mineral deposit slowly crystallizing out of solution, like something that has always been here and will always be here, patient and still and warm. And far above, in the world you left behind, the world of sunlight and wind and the quick, bright urgency of living things, the seasons are turning in their ancient round, spring giving way to summer, giving way to autumn, giving way to winter. But here in the deep chamber, nothing turns, nothing hurries, nothing changes, except in increments so small that they can only be measured in the language of stone, in the slow accumulation of mineral upon mineral, layer upon layer, age upon age, the earth writing its autobiography one atom at a time in a book that will never be finished and never needs to be. A voice speaks in the darkness, and it is not a voice you hear with your ears, but one you feel in the marrow of your bones, in the calcium lattice of your skeleton that resonates with the frequency of the surrounding stone, and it says, or rather, it suggests, implies, intimates with the gentleness of water wearing away at rock, that there is nothing to fear in the deep, that the deep is not a place of absence, but a place of profound and concentrated presence, that every atom of the stone around you was forged in the heart of a star and has been waiting, with a patience that makes the word patience seem comically inadequate, for this exact moment, this exact configuration, this exact arrangement of matter and energy and consciousness that results in you lying here, warm and safe and slowly, slowly dissolving into sleep. The surface is where things scatter, the voice murmurs, or the stone murmurs, or the darkness murmurs. It is impossible to tell which, and the impossibility is itself a comfort, a sign that the boundaries between things are softening, blurring, becoming permeable in the way they always do at the threshold of dreams. The surface is where things scatter, but the deep is where they gather, where they collect, where they remember what they are. And you feel the truth of this in the heaviness of your limbs, in the way your thoughts have stopped their restless circulation and begun to settle, like sediment in a still pool, like crystals forming in a cooling solution, each thought finding its place in the slow geometry of rest. The dripping continues, that metronome of millennia, that clock of the deep whose ticks are measured not in seconds, but in the time it takes a drop of water to swell to fullness and surrender to gravity, a span that might last 3 minutes or might last 30, depending on the season far above and the barometric pressure and the humidity and 1,000 other variables that the cave calculates without effort and without haste. Each drop is a small ceremony, a tiny ritual of accumulation and release that has been repeating in this exact spot for longer than there have been ears to hear it, and the regularity of the sound is not mechanical but organic, not metronomic but rhythmic in the way that tides are rhythmic, in the way that breathing is rhythmic, with small and beautiful variations that keep the pattern alive and breathing even as it lulls and soothes and smooths the sharp edges of consciousness. The sound travels through the warm air of the chamber like a stone dropped into water, sending out expanding spheres of compression and rarefaction that touch the walls and return, that touch the pools and set their surfaces trembling with the most delicate of disturbances, that touch your skin and enter your body through your pores, through the microscopic openings that connect your interior to the world, and the sound becomes part of you the way the warmth has become part of you, indistinguishable from the quiet functioning of your own living systems. And you realize, with a gentleness that is itself like falling water, that you have been listening to this sound your whole life, that it has been playing beneath the noise of the surface world, the way the deep ocean current flows beneath the waves, constant and patient and always there, waiting for the moment when the other sounds would fade enough for you to hear it, to recognize it, to remember that it has always been the truest sound, the sound beneath all sounds, the heartbeat of the world. In the deepest pools, where the water has been heated by its proximity to the Earth's interior to a temperature that makes the surface feel like warm silk, there are formations of crystal that have been growing in the absolute darkness for time frames that strain the human capacity for comprehension. Crystals of gypsum and selenite, some as large as the trunks of ancient trees, their surfaces perfectly transparent, their interiors free of the flaws and inclusions that plague crystals formed in the turbulent, light-struck world above. These crystals have achieved their perfection through patience alone, through the infinitesimally slow accretion of molecule upon molecule, each one finding its proper place in the lattice with a precision that no human hand could replicate, guided by nothing more than the laws of chemistry and the extraordinary length of time available to a process that has no deadline, no urgency, no purpose beyond the simple expression of its own nature. If you could hold one of these crystals, and you cannot, because they are too heavy and too sacred and too deeply embedded in the fabric of the chamber to be moved, but if you could, you would feel in its weight the concentrated patience of deep time, the geological patience that makes even the most enduring human monument seem as ephemeral as a soap bubble. And you would understand, in a way that goes beyond understanding, that patience is not a virtue but a fundamental property of the universe, as real and as inescapable as gravity. And these crystals grow still, in the darkness, in the warmth, in the silence, adding their invisible increments to structures that will outlast every civilization that has ever existed on the surface above. And their growing is a kind of breathing, a kind of sleeping, a kind of dreaming that the mineral world has been engaged in since the first rocks cooled and the first waters flowed and the first crystals found their way into being. Your breathing has become very slow now, very deep, each inhalation drawing the warm, mineral-laden air of the chamber into your lungs where it meets the blood and gives up its warmth to your interior, and each exhalation releasing back into the darkness a breath that carries with it a little of your own heat, a little of your own moisture, a little of the carbon dioxide that your cells have produced in the quiet work of keeping you alive. And this exchange, this gentle commerce between your body and the cave, is as old as breathing itself, as old as the first creature that drew air into a lung and found it good. The rhythm of your breath has synchronized with the rhythm of the dripping water so perfectly that the two sounds have become one sound, or perhaps there was never more than one sound to begin with, and the distinction between your breathing and the cave's breathing was always an illusion, a trick of the surface mind that sees boundaries everywhere and cannot conceive of the possibility that everything is, at the deepest level, connected. The water to the stone to the earth to the solar system to the galaxy to the vast and luminous web of being that stretches in every direction forever and holds all things, all times, all places in its warm and patient embrace. You are sinking now, sinking the way sediment sinks through a column of still water, slowly, gently, with no resistance and no destination other than down, down into the warmth, down into the dark, down into the place where all the things you were carrying have become too heavy to hold and have slipped from your fingers and drifted away. And the relief of this releasing is so profound that it feels like the earth itself is sighing. And perhaps it is. Perhaps this is what the great slow breathing of the mountain has been about all along. This sigh, this exhalation, this letting go. Far above, at the surface, the world continues its bright and busy turning. Birds are calling across meadows, winds are reshaping dunes, rivers are carrying their loads of silt and sand toward oceans that receive them with the same equanimity with which they have received everything for 4 billion years. But none of that reaches here. None of it disturbs the absolute peace of this deep chamber where you lie on your shelf of warm stone, your body growing heavier with each passing moment, your mind growing quieter. The phantom lights behind your closed eyes dimming now to the faintest possible glow, the last ember of visual consciousness banking itself for the night, preparing to go dark in the way that even the most devoted fire eventually goes dark. Not with a struggle, but with a graceful and willing diminishment, a slow reduction to warmth without light, to heat without flame, to presence without image. The great formations around you, the pillars and curtains and flowstones that have been building since before the dinosaurs walked the land above, stand in their places with the stillness of things that have never known the need to move, that have achieved their form through the gentlest of all possible processes, through the patient deposition of one thin layer upon another, each layer a year, each centimeter a civilization, each meter an epoch. And their stillness is not the stillness of death, but the stillness of completion, the stillness of something that has arrived at its proper shape and has no need to be anything other than what it is. And this stillness holds you the way the ocean holds its deepest waters, quietly, firmly, with an authority so absolute that it feels like tenderness, like the tenderness of something that has been holding things for so long that holding has become indistinguishable from love. In the passage of time that governs this place, geological time, the time of stone and crystal and the slow migration of continents, your presence here is briefer than the flash of a firefly, briefer than the time it takes a single drop to fall from ceiling to pool. And yet the cave receives you with the same unhurried hospitality with which it receives every drop of water, every shift in temperature, every faint vibration that reaches it from the restless surface above. Because in the deep earth there is no hierarchy of importance, no distinction between the significant and the insignificant, only the continuous, gentle, all-encompassing process of being, of matter rearranging itself in its slow and beautiful dance with energy, of warmth radiating upward and water filtering downward and crystals growing outward, and all of it held together by the same forces that hold the stars in their courses and the galaxies in their slow, majestic spirals. You are part of this process now, not a visitor, but a participant, not an observer, but an element in the great mineral dream of the earth, and your presence here, brief as it is, changes the chamber in ways that will persist for millennia. your breath adding its small cargo of moisture to the atmosphere of the cave, your warmth mingling with the warmth of the stone, your weight pressing down on the ledge where you rest with a force that is, in the absolute terms of physics, indistinguishable from the weight of any other mass, any other matter, any other arrangement of atoms drawn from the cosmic pantry and assembled into temporary form. And the cave will remember you, not in the way that human memory works, not with images or words or the ache of longing, but in the way that stone remembers, which is to say in its composition, in the infinitesimally altered chemistry of the air, in the faint depression where your body pressed against the rock, in the way that all things are remembered by the universe, which forgets nothing, which holds every event, every presence, every breath in its vast and gentle keeping. The phantom lights have faded now to something less than light, something more like the memory of light, the way the afterglow of sunset lingers on the inside of your eyelids long after the sun has dropped below the horizon. And in this near total darkness of perception, you discover something unexpected, that the darkness itself has texture, has depth, has gradation, that there are darks within darks, each shade slightly different from the last, and that navigating this spectrum of darkness is itself a kind of seeing, a way of perceiving that does not depend on photons but on something more fundamental, something that existed before eyes evolved, before light itself was separated from the dark in the first microseconds of the universe's life. The warmth around you has achieved a perfect constancy, neither rising nor falling, neither fluctuating nor fading, a steady and eternal temperature that the earth has maintained in this specific chamber for longer than any living thing has existed on its surface, a warmth that comes from the residual heat of planetary formation, from the decay of radioactive elements in the mantle, from the slow and patient friction of tectonic plates grinding against each other in their dance of continental drift. A warmth that will persist for billions of years, yet, long after the sun has swollen and dimmed, long after the oceans have evaporated and the atmosphere has thinned to nothing, because the interior of the earth is a furnace that was lit in the catastrophic fires of accretion and will not fully cool until the planet itself has ceased to exist. And in the presence of this ancient, inexhaustible warmth, your body has let go of its last remaining tension, the final held place in your shoulders or your jaw or the small of your back releasing, with a softness that feels like the stone itself loosening, like the mountain taking one of its 10,000-year breaths and letting it out with a gentleness that moves through the chamber like a warm current through deep water. And you are floating now, truly floating, in a medium of warmth and darkness and the slow, unhurried music of falling water that has been playing since before there was anyone to listen. Everything descends, whispers the darkness, or the stone, or the deep and ancient part of your own mind that remembers what it was like to be mineral, to be magma, to be stardust, cooling in the void between galaxies. Everything descends, the water through the rock, the stone through time, the waking mind through the layers of consciousness, each descent a homecoming, each surrender a return to something older and truer and more restful than anything the surface can offer. And you feel the truth of this in the marrow of your bones, in the iron of your blood that responds to the magnetic field of the earth like a compass needle turning toward north, and the descent you are making now, into sleep, into dream, into the warm and luminous darkness that lies beneath the thinking mind, is the same descent the water makes, the same patient, gravity-guided journey from the bright and scattered surface to the gathered, concentrated deep. And there's nothing to do but allow it. Nothing to hold, nothing to remember, only this warmth, only this darkness, only this slow and rhythmic sound of water finding its way home. The great chamber holds you the way the deep ocean holds its trenches, with a pressure that is not oppressive but reassuring, the weight of all the rock above you not a burden but a blanket, a covering of stone and earth, and the compressed quiet of the ages that lies over you like the heaviest and most comforting quilt ever woven. And beneath this covering you are safer than you have ever been, more held, more sheltered, more completely insulated from the bright and restless world above than any wall or roof or fortress could provide, because the protection of the deep earth is not manufactured but inherent, not built but simply present, a consequence of being far enough below the surface that the concepts of exposure and vulnerability have lost all meaning. The rock above you is its own kind of ocean, a solid ocean, a frozen sea of compressed and metamorphosed stone through which the slow currents of geological time flow like underwater rivers, reshaping, reforming, transforming limestone into marble and shale into slate and sandstone into quartzite, with the same patient artistry that the sea applies to its coral and its cliffs. And you are resting on the floor of this stone ocean in the deepest of its deep places in a warmth and a stillness that have no equivalent on the surface of the planet. And in this resting, in this profound and willing surrender to the gravity of sleep, you are doing something that every living thing has done since life first emerged from the warm mineral soup of the primordial ocean. You are returning, if only for a few hours, to the original stillness, the original warmth, the original darkness from which all things emerge and to which all things return. And the returning is sweet, and the warmth is endless, and the darkness is full of a peace so vast and so old that it makes the mountains themselves seem young. The dripping has become the only sound in your world now, and it has taken on the quality of something more than sound. It has become a presence, a companion, a faithful and unchanging friend who asks nothing of you and gives everything, who marks the passage of not-time in this timeless place with a regularity that is itself a form of care, a way of saying that even in the deepest and most absolute silence, you are not alone, that the earth is here, the water is here, the stone is here, and they have been here for longer than you can imagine and will continue to be here for longer still, and their presence is as reliable as gravity, as constant as the temperature in this chamber, as unchanging as the chemical composition of the limestone that the water deposits one invisible molecule at a time in its endless, faithful work of building. Each drop that falls is a benediction, a small baptism of mineral and warmth, and the pool that receives each drop is a chalice of the deep, a vessel of pure and patient geology that holds the accumulated offerings of centuries without overflowing, without diminishing, without changing in any way that the human senses could detect. Because the time scale on which these pools operate is so far beyond the human that it might as well be eternity, might as well be the kind of forever that mystics speak of when they run out of ordinary words. And the circles that each drop inscribes on the surface of the pool are the earth's own mandalas, geometric prayers drawn in water and dissolved in water, created and destroyed in the same moment with a graceful impermanence that the most devoted monk could spend a lifetime trying to achieve and never quite match, because the earth does not try to be impermanent. It simply is, the way the ocean is, the way the darkness is, the way sleep is when it comes unbidden and unforced and settles over you like the warmest and most welcome wave. Your thoughts have become very quiet now, quiet enough that the spaces between them have grown wider than the thoughts themselves, and in these widening spaces you can hear, or feel, or simply know the deeper rhythms of the earth, the rhythms that operate beneath the threshold of human perception, the magnetic pulse of the planet's iron core spinning in its envelope of liquid metal, the infrasonic hum of the mantle convecting in its slow, churning dance, the barely audible creak and groan of tectonic plates adjusting their positions by fractions of centimeters per year, each adjustment a note in a symphony that has been playing for 4.5 billion years and shows no sign of reaching its final movement. These rhythms are the baseline of existence, the fundamental frequencies upon which all other sounds, birdsong, ocean waves, human speech, the whispered conversations of lovers in the dark, are merely harmonics, overtones, fleeting and beautiful variations on a theme that the earth itself has been composing since it first began to differentiate, since the heavy elements sank to the center and the light ones rose to the surface, and the water found its way to the hollows, and the air wrapped itself around the whole like a thin and precious breath held in the lungs of the cosmos. And you are part of this symphony now, your own breathing contributing its small voice to the great chord, your own heartbeat adding its humble rhythm to the vast percussion of geological process. And the contribution is far beneath the surface of the world, beneath the familiar weight of soil and the tangled reach of roots, Beneath the deepest basements of the oldest cities and the patient crawl of groundwater through sandstone and shale, there exists a darkness so complete, so ancient, so profoundly unhurried in its silence, that to enter it even in imagination is to feel the very concept of time begin to soften and dissolve, to feel the rush and noise of the waking world grow distant as a half-remembered song, carried away on a current too slow and too deep to ever be called a river, and yet moving all the same, always moving, the way the earth itself moves, the way the stars drift in their enormous arcs across the sky, the way sleep moves toward you now gently, irresistibly, like a tide rising in a cavern no human eye has ever seen. And it is here, in this impossible stillness, that our story begins, not with a sound, not with a flash of light, but with the faintest tremor in the water, a ripple so delicate it could be the breath of the stone itself, exhaling after 1,000,000 years of patient silence, a whisper passed from molecule to molecule through corridors of crystal and calcite that have been growing, atom by atom, since long before any creature walked the surface of this world. Let yourself settle into this darkness as you would settle into the warmest and softest of beds, letting the weight of the day slide from your shoulders, letting your breath slow to match the rhythm of something far older and far more patient than any clock. For down here there are no clocks, no calendars, no urgent appointments with the morning. There is only the slow, deep pulse of the earth itself, holding everything safely within its ancient embrace, the way the ocean holds every drop of rain that has ever fallen, the way the night sky holds every star that has ever burned, cradling each one in its vast and tender darkness. Imagine, if you will, a pool of water, not the kind of pool you might picture on a summer afternoon, bright and rippling with reflected light, but something far more still, far more secret, a body of water that has been sealed away from the open air for longer than the human mind can comfortably hold, for millions upon millions of years, resting in a chamber of stone so deep within the earth that the weight of the rock above presses down with a quiet, immense authority, the way the deepest ocean presses upon its floor, and yet the water remains patient and clear and impossibly ancient, carrying within its chemistry the memory of atmospheres that no longer exist, of skies that vanished long before the first flower ever opened its petals to the sun. The surface of this water, if you could see it, if you could somehow bring a candle or a lantern into this sealed cathedral of stone, would be so still it would look like glass, like a mirror laid upon the floor of the world, reflecting nothing because there is nothing here to reflect, only the soft mineral darkness and the faint, almost imperceptible warmth rising from somewhere deeper still, from the slow furnace at the heart of the planet, that ancient engine of heat and pressure that has been burning quietly, steadily since the earth was young. And in this water, in this impossible, lightless, timeless pool, something lives, something so small, so translucent, so exquisitely adapted to its world of silence and stone, that to call it merely alive seems almost insufficient, as though the word itself needs to be expanded, deepened, made wide enough to hold the sheer improbability and wonder of a creature that has made its home in a place the sun has never touched, thriving in conditions that would silence every other form of life we know. And yet here it is, drifting through the darkness with a grace that seems less evolved than dreamed, a grace that belongs to the deepest and most peaceful of sleeps. The creature is no larger than a grain of rice, and its body is the color of nothing at all, translucent, almost invisible, a living whisper made of water and patience and the faintest architecture of cells, each one a tiny cathedral of chemistry, performing its quiet miracles in the dark, converting the slow energy of minerals and dissolved gases into the delicate machinery of life. And if you could hold it in the palm of your hand, though no human hand has ever touched one, and perhaps no human hand ever will, you would feel almost nothing, only the slightest coolness, the barest suggestion of weight, like a single snowflake that has not yet decided whether to melt or to remain. Its eyes, or rather the places where eyes once were, in some distant ancestor that swam through brighter waters in a younger world, have long since faded, generation after generation, releasing the burden of sight the way a tree in autumn releases its leaves, slowly, gracefully, without grief, until all that remains is a smoothness where vision used to be, a gentle blankness that speaks not of loss, but of perfect adaptation, of a creature so wholly at home in its darkness that light itself has become unnecessary, a memory dissolved into the ancient water like salt, like time, like the softest sigh. Instead of sight, this creature navigates by tremor, by the faintest vibration in the water around it, sensing the presence of walls and currents and other drifting beings through a language so subtle, so intimate, that it is less like hearing and more like dreaming, a language of chemical whispers and pressure waves too delicate for any human instrument to fully decode, a conversation between the creature and its world that has been going on uninterrupted for longer than civilizations have risen and fallen on the bright surface far above, and will continue long after every city has been forgotten, held safely in the slow, deep patience of the stone. Let your breathing slow now, if it hasn't already. Let it find the rhythm of this underground water, this current that moves so gently through its corridors of rock that you could watch it for 1,000 years and barely see it shift. And yet it is always moving, always carrying its tiny passengers through chambers and passages that have been carved not by any hand, but by the patient work of water itself, over geological time, over spans so vast they make the whole of human history look like a single ripple on an infinite sea. Feel the weight of your body settling deeper into wherever you are resting. Feel the tension in your muscles beginning to dissolve the way minerals dissolve into water, slowly, imperceptibly, molecule by molecule, until what was once solid becomes part of something larger, something fluid, something that flows without effort through the dark, warm passages of sleep. There is no urgency here. There is nothing that needs to be done, nothing that needs to be decided or remembered or solved. There's only the slow drift, the gentle pull of the current, the quiet companionship of creatures who have been at peace in this darkness for longer than any mind can measure, and who ask nothing of the world above except to be left in their silence, their stillness, their extraordinary unhurried dream of being alive. Deeper now, and further, through passages where the stone changes color in bands of ochre and iron red, and the palest, most delicate blue, each band a chapter in a story written not in words but in the slow language of geology, in the patient deposition of sediment over ages so long that the very continents have wandered like sleepers, turning in their beds, drifting apart and coming together again in a dance so slow it can only be read in the grain of the rock itself, in the angle of a crystal, in the faint trace of a fossilized current, frozen in stone like a memory frozen in the mind of someone who has just, at last, begun to dream. The air in these deeper passages, if there is air at all, is something altogether alien, bearing more resemblance to the atmospheres of distant moons than to the breeze above any meadow, thick with gases that have been exhaled by the stone over millennia, rich with hydrogen sulfide and methane and other compounds whose names sound more like incantations than like chemistry. And yet even here, even in this atmosphere that would be hostile to every form of life we encounter in our daily world, something has found a way to persist, to adapt, to quietly, stubbornly, beautifully insist on the improbable miracle of its own existence. Microbial colonies cling to crystal formations in these sulfuric chambers, their bodies so small that 1,000 of them could rest on the head of a pin. And yet each one is a universe unto itself, a complete and functioning system of chemistry and energy and information, drawing sustenance not from the sun, which is, down here, not even a rumor, not even a legend, but from the slow, patient reactions between stone and gas, from the deep earth's own quiet metabolism, living at a pace so unhurried that a single generation may span what we on the surface would call centuries, thriving in their impossible sanctuary. While above them, unimaginably far above, seasons turn and oceans shift, and the stars themselves wheel through their ancient patterns, and all of it, held within the same vast, gentle, turning world. Think of the ocean now, as you settle deeper still into this story, into this quietness, into the warm, heavy softness of your own approaching sleep. Think of the ocean not as a surface, but as a volume, as a depth, as a great, breathing body of water that covers most of the world and holds within itself more mystery than every library ever built, more silence than every cathedral, more life than every forest. And yet from above it looks so simple, so serene, just a vast blue mirror reflecting the sky, the way the surface of your thoughts looks calm. Now even as beneath them, in the deeper waters of your mind, something is shifting, softening, letting go. The ocean, too, has its impossible places, its sealed chambers and lightless corridors, its trenches so deep that the pressure alone could crush steel. And yet even there, even in the absolute darkness of the abyssal plain, where the weight of miles of water presses down with a force that seems to forbid the very possibility of anything fragile or alive, creatures drift and pulse and glow with their own cold light, bioluminescent sparks in the void, tiny lanterns carried through the deep by beings who have never known the sun and never will, who have made their peace with the darkness so completely that they have become part of it, indistinguishable from the deep except for their faint, ethereal glow. And even that is not meant for human eyes, but for each other, a language of light spoken in a world of darkness, a conversation as old as the ocean itself. And is it not a kind of comfort, a kind of deep, bone-deep reassurance to know that life persists in these impossible places, that in the most hostile, the most forgotten, the most lightless and pressurized and chemically alien corners of this world, something has found a way not merely to survive but to thrive, to adapt, to make a home where no home should be possible, to dream its slow, strange, beautiful dream of existence in defiance of every rule we thought we understood. Let that thought settle over you now like a blanket, like the weight of warm water, like the gentle pressure of the deep, the knowledge that life is wider and more mysterious than we have yet dared to imagine, that the definition of what it means to be alive is not a narrow doorway, but a vast, open field stretching in every direction. And somewhere in that field, in a place you cannot see but can perhaps begin to feel, there is a space that has been waiting for you, a space as warm and as dark and as perfectly still as the deepest underground pool. And you are drifting toward it now, carried by a current you did not choose, but that chose you, a current as old as the stone, as patient as the crystal, as gentle as the faintest tremor in the water. In the caverns where the translucent creatures drift, where the microbial colonies cling to their crystals in their sulfuric chambers, time does not move the way it moves on the surface, does not tick or rush or demand. It flows, if it moves at all, the way honey flows, the way lava flows deep beneath the ocean floor, the way your thoughts are flowing now, slower and slower, each one dissolving into the next before it is fully formed. And this is not a loss. This is not something to resist. This is the most natural thing in the world. This is the way all living things return, eventually, to the rhythm of the deep, to the pace of the stone, to the unhurried pulse of a planet that has been spinning in its orbit for 4.5 billion years and has never once been in a hurry. The creatures in the underground pools do not measure their lives in days or weeks or years. They measure them, if they measure them at all, in the slow accumulation of minerals on the walls around them, in the gradual shift of chemical concentrations in their water, in tremors that might be the distant echo of an earthquake, or the even more distant echo of the moon pulling on the Earth's crust as it passes overhead. And each of these measurements is so long, so slow, so beautifully patient, that to a human mind they would seem like stillness itself, like the absence of time rather than its passage. And perhaps that is the truest kind of time there is, time that does not pass but simply is, the way the stone simply is, the way the darkness simply is, the way you, in this moment, simply are. Let us follow the water now, deeper still, through a passage so narrow that the stone walls nearly touch, their surfaces slick with moisture and faintly warm, warm with the heat of the Earth's interior, that great slow furnace that has been burning since the planet was born, not with flame, but with the patient decay of ancient elements, with the compression of rock upon rock, generating a warmth so steady, so reliable, so deeply comforting, that it has sustained these underground ecosystems for longer than the mountains above have existed, for longer than the rivers that carved the valleys, for longer than the ice sheets that once covered half the globe and then retreated, slowly, gently, like a blanket pulled back by an invisible hand, revealing the green, breathing world beneath. The water carries us. You can feel it, can't you? The way a dream carries you, not with force, but with inevitability, not with speed, but with certainty, through this narrow passage and into a chamber that opens suddenly, unexpectedly, like a held breath released, a chamber so vast that the walls and ceiling disappear into darkness, and the only way you know you are in a large space is by the change in the sound of the water, which goes from a close, intimate murmur to something wider, something that echoes faintly before being absorbed by the stone, the way a word spoken in a cathedral seems to hang in the air for a moment before being gently taken up by the silence. And in this chamber, suspended in the water like stars suspended in the sky, the translucent creatures drift in their hundreds, their thousands, each one a tiny miracle of adaptation, each one carrying within its delicate, pigmentless body the memory of a journey that began millions of years ago when the cave was first sealed and the water was first cut off from the light, and they have been here ever since, generation after generation, each one a little more perfectly suited to its world of darkness, each one a little more at home in the deep, until now they are so perfectly a part of this place that they seem not like visitors to the darkness, but like expressions of it, like the darkness itself has learned to drift, to breathe, to dream. There is a stillness here that goes beyond the absence of sound, a stillness that is not empty but full, full the way the ocean is full, full the way the night sky is full of stars you cannot see until you stop looking for them. And this is the kind of stillness that is waiting for you now on the other side of wakefulness, in the warm, dark, welcoming waters of sleep. A stillness so complete that even your thoughts, those restless darting fish that have been circling and circling all day, begin to slow, begin to settle, begin to find their places in the great calm pool of your mind, and one by one they stop moving. And one by one they become part of the stillness, and the stillness holds them, and the stillness holds you. And there is nothing to fear, and nothing to do, and nothing to be, except exactly what you are, here, now, breathing, resting, drifting, held. Above you, impossibly far above, the surface of the world goes on with its noise and its light and its ceaseless activity. But down here, in the deep, in the warm, dark, none of that matters, none of that reaches you, and you are free to rest in the knowledge that the world will keep turning without your help, that the stars will keep burning, that the tides will keep rising and falling, that the great slow mechanisms of the planet will continue their ancient work, while you sleep. And when you wake, everything will be exactly as it should be, held in its place by the same patient forces that have held the water in these underground chambers for millions upon millions of years. Now let your mind drift, the way the eyeless creatures drift, without effort, without direction, carried by a current that knows where it is going, even if you do not, and trust that current the way the creatures trust it, with the whole of your being, with every cell, with every breath. Because this current has been flowing since long before you were born, and will continue long after, and it has never once led anything astray. It has only ever carried life forward, gently, patiently, through the dark passages and into the wide, still chambers, and it is carrying you now, and you can feel it, the warmth of it, the slowness of it, the way it asks nothing of you except that you let go, that you release the last of your grip on the waking world and allow yourself to be taken, softly, surely, into the deep. Think of how the microbial colonies on their crystals experience time, not as a sequence of urgent moments, but as a single, continuous, unbroken flow, a river so wide and so calm that standing on its banks you could not tell which direction it was moving, could not say whether it was flowing forward or backward, or simply staying still. And this is the time you are entering now. This is the river you are stepping into, a river made not of water, but of rest, not of hours, but of peace, and it will carry you as gently as the underground streams carry their translucent passengers through the lightless galleries of stone. In the deepest parts of the ocean, and we are in the ocean now, we have followed the water all the way down, through the rock and the stone and the sealed chambers, and the water has led us here, to the place where all underground rivers eventually arrive, to the great body of water that covers most of the world and holds within itself every secret the planet has ever kept. In the deepest parts, where the light from the surface is not even a memory, where the pressure is a constant, heavy, almost tender embrace. There are creatures that have never known anything but this depth, this darkness, this silence, and they move through it with a serenity that can only come from perfect belonging, from being so completely and utterly at home that the concept of home itself dissolves, becomes unnecessary, the way the concept of light is unnecessary to a creature that has never seen it, the way the concept of hurry is unnecessary to a being that has all of eternity spread out before it like a dark, calm sea. Some of these creatures carry their own light, a cold blue-green glow produced by the chemistry of their own bodies, and they move through the deep like lanterns carried by ghosts, illuminating nothing but each other, signaling across the void in a language of light that is the oldest language in the ocean, older than the songs of whales, older than the clicking of dolphins, older than any sound that has ever been made by any throat or any tongue, a language that was ancient when the first fish grew legs and crawled onto land, and that continues now in the darkness, in the deep, in the silence, patient and beautiful and endlessly, endlessly alive. Imagine sinking slowly, gently, through water that grows warmer as you descend, water that wraps around you like the softest fabric, like the warmest embrace, water that holds you with a pressure that is not crushing but cradling, not confining but containing, the way a nest contains an egg, the way a shell contains a pearl, the way your bed contains you now. And as you sink, the last of the light fades, not suddenly, not with any shock or alarm, but gradually, imperceptibly, the way the last color fades from the sky at the very end of twilight, the way the last note of a song fades into silence, until there is only the darkness, only the warmth, only the slow rhythmic pulse of the water against your skin. And you realize that this darkness is not an absence but a presence, not an emptiness but a fullness, the fullness of the deep, the fullness of rest, the fullness of a world that does not need to be seen to be known, that does not need to be understood to be loved. And in this darkness, in this warmth, in this impossible, ancient, nurturing deep, you are not alone. All around you, drifting with the same current that carries you, are the creatures of the abyss, the translucent and the luminescent, the eyeless and the ancient, the small and the patient, each one a testament to the persistence of life, each one a quiet proof that even in the most unlikely places, even in conditions that seem to forbid the very possibility of existence, something finds a way to be, to persist, to dream its slow dream, and you are part of this now, part of this dream, part of this ancient, ongoing, luminous persistence, and all you need to do is rest. The stone remembers everything. This is something the geologists know, but rarely say aloud, perhaps because it sounds more like poetry than science, more like prayer than measurement. And yet it is true, profoundly and beautifully true, that every layer of rock beneath the surface of the earth is a memory, a record of conditions that existed millions or billions of years ago, preserved in mineral and crystal and the fossilized trace of ancient seas. And if you could read the stone the way you read a book, you would find the story of the entire world written there, in a language so slow and so patient that a single sentence might take 1,000,000 years to complete, and you would find, woven through that story like a golden thread through dark fabric, the story of life itself, the story of how something improbable and miraculous and stubbornly beautiful emerged from the chemistry of rock and water and gas and refused, absolutely refused, to be extinguished, and has been refusing ever since, in every cave and every trench and every sealed chamber and every impossible, lightless, pressurized corner of this extraordinary planet. And you are part of that story too. You are one of its latest chapters, one of its most complex and most beautiful expressions. And even now, as you rest, as you drift, as the current carries you deeper into sleep, the story continues to write itself through you, through the chemistry of your own body, through the slow, rhythmic pulse of your own breath, through the dreams that are beginning to form behind your closed eyes, like crystals forming on the walls of an underground chamber, slowly, patiently, one molecule at a time. The chemical whispers that the creatures use to navigate their lightless world, those signals too subtle for any human instrument to fully decode, are not so different perhaps from the signals your own body sends as it prepares for sleep, the gentle cascade of chemistry that tells your muscles to soften, your breathing to deepen, your heart to slow, your thoughts to loosen their grip on the waking world and begin to drift. And if you listen very carefully, not with your ears, but with something deeper, something older, something that lives in the quiet spaces between your thoughts, you can almost hear them, those whispers, those ancient molecular lullabies. And they are saying the same thing the underground water has been saying for millions of years, the same thing the deep ocean has been saying since the world began, which is, rest now. Rest now. There is nothing to fear. There is nothing to solve. There is only this moment, this breath, this darkness, this warmth, this slow, deep, eternal current, and it will carry you. It will hold you. It will keep you safe while you sleep. The creatures in the sealed pools know this instinctively, without thought, without effort. They know that the water will provide, that the stone will shelter, that the slow chemistry of the deep will sustain them, and they give themselves over to it completely, without reservation, without anxiety, without any of the resistance that we surface dwellers carry with us like stones in our pockets. And perhaps this is what they can teach us, these impossible, translucent, eyeless beings. Perhaps the lesson of the deep is simply this, that letting go is not a loss but a homecoming, not a surrender, but a return to something vast and ancient and infinitely patient that has been waiting for us all along. Far above, on the surface of the ocean, for we are in the ocean now, or perhaps we have always been in the ocean, perhaps the underground rivers and the sealed chambers and the sulfuric caverns were always part of the ocean, always connected by the slow, invisible movement of water through the body of the earth. Far above, the waves move in their eternal rhythm, that slow, steady, breathing pattern of rise and fall, crest and trough, advance and retreat, that has been the heartbeat of the planet since the first ocean formed, billions of years ago, on a world so young and so hot that the rain fell and evaporated and fell again for millions of years before it could finally pool on the cooling surface and become, at last, the sea. And that rhythm, that slow oceanic breathing, is the same rhythm your body is finding now, the same rise and fall, the same gentle pulse, as though your breath and the ocean's breath were one and the same, as though you had always been part of this vast liquid breathing world, and were only now remembering it, here in the darkness, here in the warmth, here in the deep quiet center of the night. The waves above are silver with moonlight, or perhaps they are dark, lit only by the stars, by the faint cold glow of galaxies so distant that their light has been traveling toward this moment for longer than the earth has existed. And yet here it is, arriving precisely now, precisely here, touching the surface of the water with the lightest of touches, the way sleep is touching you now, barely there, almost imperceptible and yet undeniable, and yet irresistible, the lightest, most patient, most ancient touch in the world. In the spaces between the crystals, in the chambers where the microbial colonies live their centuries-long lives, there is a quality of silence that is difficult to describe to anyone who has only known the silence of the surface, the silence of a library, say, or the silence of a snowy field at night, because this silence is deeper, older, more complete, a silence that has been accumulating for millions of years, the way sediment accumulates on the ocean floor, layer upon layer upon layer, until the silence itself has become a kind of substance, a kind of medium, thick and warm and nourishing. A silence you could wrap yourself in the way you wrap yourself in a blanket. A silence that does not wait to be broken, but is perfectly content to go on forever. And perhaps this is the purest form of silence there is, silence that has never been disturbed by any human voice, that carries within it no echo of any word ever spoken, only the slow, deep, wordless hum of the earth itself, the vibration of a planet turning in space. And even that hum is so low, so constant, so utterly without urgency that it is less a sound than a feeling, a vibration in the bones, in the blood, in the part of you that is older than language, older than thought, the part of you that knows, without being told, how to sleep. And you are in that silence now, you are wrapped in it, you are held by it, and it asks nothing of you, demands nothing, expects nothing. It only offers itself, vast and warm and ancient, the oldest lullaby, the first and last and deepest quiet. And you are welcome here. You have always been welcome here, and you can stay as long as you like. The translucent creatures, those tiny eyeless pilgrims of the deep, have a quality that scientists call neoteny, which means they retain throughout their lives certain features that in other species belong only to the young, a kind of perpetual childhood of the body, a permanent softness, a never-ending beginning. And there is something profoundly gentle about this, something that speaks to the tenderness of the deep, to the way these sealed and lightless worlds seem to encourage not hardness, but softness, not armor, but transparency, not speed, but patience, as though the deep knows, if a place can be said to know, that the greatest strength is not in resistance, but in yielding, not in fortification, but in openness, not in seeing, but in feeling. And these creatures, with their translucent bodies and their absent eyes and their exquisite sensitivity to the faintest tremor in the water, are the living proof of this knowing. The embodiment of a wisdom so old and so quiet that it makes no arguments, issues no proclamations, writes no books, but simply exists, simply persists, simply goes on being soft and transparent and patient in the darkness and invites you to do the same. Let your body be soft now. Let your thoughts be transparent. Let your breath be patient and feel the tremors, not in the water, but in the air around you. The faintest vibrations of the night, the distant hum of a world at rest, the slow, deep pulse of the planet beneath you. And know that you are held, as the creatures are held, in the warm, dark, nurturing waters of something vast and ancient and infinitely kind. There's a place in the ocean, and this is not a metaphor, this is a real place, as real as the pillow beneath your head, as real as the darkness behind your eyelids, a place where the tectonic plates of the Earth's crust pull apart, slowly, imperceptibly, and the magma rises from below to fill the gap, and where the hot, mineral-rich water meets the cold ocean water, great plumes of chemical smoke billow upward from the sea floor like the breath of sleeping dragons, and around these hydrothermal vents, in temperatures that would scald and in chemistry that would poison, life gathers in astonishing abundance, tube worms and shrimp and crabs and microbial mats so thick and so productive that they rival the most fertile jungles on the surface. All of it sustained not by sunlight, but by the heat of the earth itself, by the slow, deep planetary metabolism that has been running since the world was formed. And there is something profoundly reassuring about this, something that speaks to the unquenchable stubbornness of life, to its refusal to be confined to the bright and the comfortable and the easy, to its insistence on finding a way, always finding a way, even in the most impossible conditions, even in the places that seem most hostile to its existence. And if life can do this, if life can flourish in the darkness and the heat and the pressure of the deep ocean floor, then surely, you can find rest tonight. Surely you can let the warmth of the earth's own body cradle you. Surely you can trust the darkness to hold you and the silence to keep you safe, for you are, after all, a creature of this planet, made of the same elements, sustained by the same chemistry, held by the same gravity. And the deep is not foreign to you, it is home. And now the current is slowing, and the water around you is growing warmer still, and the darkness is deeper than it has ever been. And this is not a thing to fear, but a thing to welcome. The way you welcome the heaviest, most restful part of sleep, the part where dreams are not stories, but sensations, not images, but feelings, the part where you are not a person with a name and a history and a list of things to do tomorrow, but simply a being, a warm and breathing being, held in the arms of something enormous and gentle, something that has been doing this holding, this cradling, this patient, loving work of sustaining life in the darkness for longer than any mind can comprehend, and will continue doing it for longer still. And you are part of it. You have always been part of it, and to sleep is simply to remember this, to let the surface of your awareness settle like sediment to the bottom of a still pool, and to rest there in the clear, warm water, in the ancient silence, in the company of creatures who have been at peace for millions of years. The chemical whispers are all around you now, too subtle to hear, too delicate to name, but you can feel them. You can feel the slow exchange of information between your body and the darkness, between your breath and the silence, between your sleep and the deep. And each whisper says the same thing, in a language older than any language you have ever spoken, a language that is not made of words but of warmth, of weight, of the slow, rhythmic pulse of a world that has never stopped turning, that has never stopped holding, that has never stopped whispering its ancient, wordless lullaby to every creature that has ever rested in its arms. The crystals in the deepest chambers grow so slowly that you could watch one for your entire lifetime and see no change. And yet change is happening. Atom by atom, molecule by molecule, the way change happens in you as you sleep, the quiet work of restoration and renewal that goes on beneath the surface of your awareness, the patient chemistry of cells repairing and rebuilding and preparing you for whatever comes next. And this work, like the growth of crystals, does not require your attention or your effort. It only requires your rest, your willingness to let go, to stop directing and controlling and planning, and simply allow the ancient, reliable machinery of your own body to do what it has been doing since before you were born, since before your mother was born, since before the first human being ever closed their eyes and drifted into the warm, dark, welcoming waters of sleep. And so the crystals grow, and so you sleep, and so the world turns, and so the stars wheel overhead, and so the tides rise and fall, and so the translucent creatures drift through their lightless rivers, navigating by tremor, by whisper, by the faintest chemical signal in the ancient water, and everything is held, everything is cradled, everything is safe, and the deep goes on, patient and warm and dark, the way it has always gone on, the way it will always go on, forever and forever. The oldest story, the quietest story, the story that has no beginning and no end, but only an endless, gentle, unfolding middle, like the middle of the night, like the middle of the ocean, like the middle of the deepest, most restful sleep you have ever known. And somewhere in this middle, this warm, dark, infinite middle, there is a sound, or rather not a sound, but the memory of a sound, the echo of the last wave that touched the shore before you fell asleep. And it is so faint, so distant, so beautifully removed from anything that could be called urgency or alarm, that it sounds less like a wave and more like a breath, the breath of the ocean itself, slow and deep and perfectly rhythmic, rising and falling with the patience of something that has been breathing for 4 billion years and has never once forgotten how. And your own breath has matched it now, has become part of it, has joined the great, slow, oceanic breathing of the planet, and you are not separate from this anymore. You are not a watcher or a listener or a visitor. You are part of the deep, part of the silence, part of the ancient, ongoing, luminous persistence of life in all its impossible, mysterious, beautiful forms. The eyeless creatures drift through you now, or you drift through them, and the distinction does not matter, has never mattered, will never matter, because in the deep there are no boundaries, no borders, no walls between one kind of life and another. There is only the water, only the warmth, only the slow chemical conversation between stone and gas and the delicate translucent beings who have made their home in the darkness and who are, in their own quiet, unheard somewhere beneath the surface of the world, in a place where sunlight has never reached and never will. There is a silence so complete that it seems to hum with its own gentle frequency, a silence that is not the absence of sound, but rather the presence of something older and more patient than sound has ever been, something that was waiting in the dark long before the first creature drew breath on the surface above, and that will go on waiting, calm and unhurried, long after the last star is dimmed in the sky overhead. The stone remembers everything and nothing, carries within its layered bands the slow diary of millennia, the settling of ancient seabeds, the gradual compression of shells into chalk, the patient alchemy by which water and mineral and the quiet pressure of deep time have fashioned corridors and chambers and cathedral spaces that no architect could have imagined, their walls gleaming faintly with moisture that has been traveling downward, drop by drop, for longer than human civilization has existed. If you were to press your palm against such a wall, you would feel a coolness that goes all the way through you. Not the sharp cold of winter, but the temperate, even coolness of something that has never known a season, something held at the same gentle temperature for 10,000 years. And you would understand, in that moment of contact between your warm skin and the ancient limestone, that the earth is not empty beneath us, but full full of darkness, full of water, full of spaces that breathe slowly in and out with the rhythm of pressures we cannot see, and that this fullness is a kind of kindness, a reminder that not everything needs to be known in order to be cherished. And so tonight, as the world above settles into its own familiar darkness, and the sounds of the day grow quieter and more distant, like voices receding down a long hallway, let yourself imagine that you are sinking, not falling, never falling, but sinking the way warmth sinks into a tired muscle, the way a stone sinks through still water, slowly and with a kind of grace that belongs to gravity itself, down through the layers of the world into a place where time moves differently, where the hours are not counted by clocks, but by the slow dripping of water into pools that have been filling, one crystalline drop at a time since before the pyramids were built. The air around you is mild, neither warm nor cold but perfectly balanced, carrying with it the faintest mineral scent, like rain on clean stone, and there is a humidity to it that feels almost tender against your skin, as though the cave itself is breathing gently beside you, matching your rhythm, asking nothing. You do not need a light here, not yet, because the darkness itself has a quality of softness, of velvet, of something that has been smoothed and polished by eons of absolute stillness, and you can feel it settling around your shoulders like a blanket woven from the quietest hours of the quietest night the world has ever known. And somewhere far below, so far that it might be the heartbeat of the earth itself, there is the sound of water, not rushing, not urgent, but moving with the unhurried patience of something that has carved its path one molecule at a time through solid rock, and will go on carving, go on flowing, go on singing its barely audible song into chambers where the only audience is the stone itself and the slow, sacred silence that fills every space between the drops. The entrance, if you can call it that, is not a doorway but a gradual yielding, a place where the hillside curves inward, and the grass gives way to moss, and the moss gives way to bare stone that is damp to the touch and faintly warm, as though the earth beneath has been holding its breath, and now exhales a slow, mineral sigh that carries with it the scent of ancient water and the almost imperceptible vibration of vast spaces hidden just beyond the reach of sight. You do not step through so much as you are received, the way a river receives a leaf that has drifted down from an overhanging branch, without resistance, without ceremony, simply folding you into its current and carrying you forward into the deepening hush. The light changes first, not vanishing all at once, but softening, degree by degree, the way the sky softens at dusk, passing through shades of amber and gray, and then into a darkness that is not frightening but intimate, close, like the darkness behind your own closed eyelids when you are very nearly asleep. And in this fading, you feel something loosen in your chest, some tension you did not know you were carrying beginning to dissolve, because here there is nothing to watch for, nothing to track, nothing that requires the vigilance of sight, and the relief of that is deeper than you expected, deeper than you can quite explain. The passage curves gently downward, and you follow it the way you might follow a melody that you recognize but cannot name, each step taking you further from the bright, busy surface of things and deeper into the earth's own quiet, where the only measure of distance is the growing richness of the silence and the slow, rhythmic sound of water that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, as though the stone itself is murmuring a lullaby. It learned from the sea 100 million years ago, when all of this, the limestone, the clay, the delicate tracery of crystal forming along the walls, was still the floor of an ocean so vast and warm and still that the creatures swimming through it had no concept of shore, no knowledge of a world above the waves, only the gentle rocking darkness and the certainty that they were held. The first chamber opens around you the way a cupped hand opens to release a firefly, slowly, with a kind of tender reluctance, the walls pulling back and the ceiling rising until you can no longer sense where it ends. And in this sudden spaciousness, there is a feeling of arrival, of having come to a place that was always here, always waiting, patient as the stone itself. The floor is smooth beneath you, worn by water that flowed here in some earlier age and has since moved on, leaving behind a surface that is cool and faintly polished. And if you were to lie down upon it, you would feel the way it supports you completely, every curve of your body met by the solid, unmoving certainty of rock that has not shifted in 10,000 years and will not shift for 10,000 more. And there is a profound comfort in that, in being held by something so ancient and so sure. The air tastes clean, carries no dust, no pollen, no trace of the world above, only the pure mineral breath of the earth itself. And you draw it in slowly, feeling it fill your lungs with a coolness that is gentle rather than sharp, like drinking water from a deep spring. And with each breath, you feel yourself settling further, growing heavier and more still, as though your body is remembering something it knew long ago, some original restfulness that existed before worry was invented, before hurry, before the first clock ever ticked. Somewhere in the darkness above you, water has found its way through a seam in the rock and is falling, not in a stream, but in single separated drops, each one striking a pool below with a sound so pure and clear that it seems to ring not just in the air but in the stone itself, a tiny bell tolling at intervals so regular and so slow that they become a kind of heartbeat, the heartbeat of the cave. And you find your own breathing beginning to match it, slowing, deepening, until you and the cave are breathing together in the darkness, two rhythms becoming one, held in the vast, timeless patience of the earth. There are places in these depths where the passages narrow, where the stone draws close and the ceiling lowers until the space is no wider than a whisper, no taller than a sigh, and these are not obstacles but boundaries, gentle refusals offered without malice, the way a sleeping creature might shift in its rest and close a gap that was once open, and there is no need to pass through them, no urgency to go further, because the earth in its quiet wisdom has decided that some spaces are meant to remain untouched. Some chambers are meant to hold only their own silence and the slow, secret work of water and mineral and time. You can feel the air moving through these narrow places, though, a faint, warm draft that carries with it the suggestion of vastness on the other side, of rooms so large that a shout would take seconds to return as an echo, of underground lakes so still and clear that the reflections on their surfaces would be indistinguishable from the stone above. And knowing that these places exist without needing to see them is its own form of peace. The way knowing that someone you love is sleeping safely in the next room is enough to quiet your heart, enough to let you rest. The earth holds these secrets not as a miser holds coins, but as a grandmother holds letters, tenderly, with a kind of reverence for the privacy of what is written inside, and you understand, standing at the threshold of one of these narrowing passages, with the warm draft touching your face like a gentle hand, that some mysteries are more beautiful for remaining mysteries, that the unknown is not a darkness to be feared, but a darkness to be trusted, and that there is something deeply, unexpectedly comforting in knowing that the world still contains places that are entirely, perfectly themselves, untouched and unwitnessed, and quietly, magnificently alive. And far below, in those unreachable chambers, the water goes on dripping, the crystals go on growing, the silence goes on deepening, and the earth goes on holding it all with the same patient tenderness with which the night holds the sleeping world, asking nothing, expecting nothing, simply being, vast and dark and warm and ancient and full of the kind of peace that has no opposite, because it was here before conflict was ever imagined, and will be here long after the last argument has been forgotten. You rest now in the chamber you have found, and the stone beneath you is neither hard nor soft, but simply present, a surface that has been waiting for this moment with the same unhurried patience with which it waited for the water to carve it, and your body, which has carried so much today, the weight of decisions, the tension of thoughts held too tightly, the subtle, constant effort of being upright in a world that asks so much. Your body now releases all of that into the stone, lets it flow downward the way water flows downward, finding its own level. And what remains is a lightness, an emptiness that is not lack but spaciousness, the same spaciousness you would feel if you were floating on your back in a warm, still ocean, the water supporting every part of you equally, the sky above so wide and dark and full of stars that the boundary between yourself and the night begins to dissolve. The temperature here has not changed in centuries. It is the temperature of the earth's own body, a gentle constant that wraps around you like bathwater that has been drawn to the perfect warmth. And in this unchanging warmth, your muscles begin to let go, First, the ones in your jaw and your forehead, then the ones in your shoulders and your back, then the deeper ones. The ones you did not know were clenched, the ones that have been holding you together through all the small emergencies of consciousness, and as they soften, you feel yourself spreading, widening, becoming less a single point of tension and more a gentle, diffuse presence, like fog settling into a valley at dawn. And this is good. This is right. This is the body remembering its oldest skill, which is the skill of rest. The dripping continues, that single, perfect note, repeated at intervals so slow and regular that it becomes not a sound but a texture, a quality of the silence itself, and each drop that falls carries with it a tiny cargo of mineral, a microscopic offering that will be laid down on the surface of the pool below, joining the millions of offerings that came before, building something that will not be finished for another 1,000 years. And the patience of this process, the absolute absence of hurry, enters you through your skin and settles into your bones, and you understand that you are being taught something by the cave, something that cannot be spoken but only felt, that the deepest rest comes not from trying to sleep, but from letting go of the effort of waking. The way the deepest caverns were formed not by force, but by the gentle, persistent yielding of stone to water, one drop at a time, one moment at a time, for longer than the mind can comprehend. In the pools that gather in the low places of these underground chambers, the water is so clear that it appears to not exist at all. You might reach your hand toward the surface and find it deeper than you thought, your fingers passing through a boundary so subtle it feels like moving from one kind of air into another, slightly cooler, slightly denser, and the ripple that spreads outward from your touch moves with a slowness that belongs to honey rather than water, carrying your small disturbance outward in concentric rings that grow wider and wider until they reach the stone edges of the pool and are absorbed, taken back into the stillness as gently as they were given. And within moments, the surface is perfect again, a mirror reflecting the darkness above with such fidelity that the reflection and the reality become interchangeable, and you cannot tell where the water ends and the air begins. These pools have been filling for millennia, each drop of water having traveled through the stone above on a journey that began perhaps as a rainstorm on the surface 100 years ago, percolating downward through layers of soil and limestone and clay, picking up minerals along the way, growing purer and cooler and more patient with each inch of its descent, until it arrives here, in this chamber that has never known sunlight, and joins the body of water that is waiting for it with the same quiet acceptance with which the ocean waits for every river that flows toward it. If you listen, not with your ears, but with some older, deeper organ of attention, the same one that allows you to feel the presence of a sleeping person in a dark room, you can hear the pool breathing, a subtle tidal rhythm that is too slow to measure, a rising and falling of the water level that corresponds to pressures deep within the earth, to the movement of underground rivers that flow through corridors of polished limestone miles from here, connected to this pool by passages so narrow that only water can travel them, and even the water must wait, must slow, must thin itself to a single molecule's width to pass through. And it does this without complaint, without urgency, because water has always understood what stone is still learning, that patience is not the endurance of difficulty, but the recognition that there is no difficulty, only the slow, inevitable unfolding of what was always going to happen. And this recognition, settling into you like the water settling into the pool, carries with it a drowsiness so deep and so natural that it feels less like falling asleep and more like remembering a sleep you have always been having, a rest that began before you were born and will continue after you are gone, held in the dark, warm, quietly alive body of the earth. There are creatures that live in these deep places, though perhaps live is too active a word for what they do. They persist, they endure, they carry on with the simple, elegant business of existence in a way that is so unhurried it borders on meditation, blind fish that navigate by senses we do not have names for, translucent shrimp that drift through underground rivers like thoughts through a dreaming mind. And they have been here for so long, separated from the world of light for so many thousands of generations, that they have shed everything unnecessary, color, sight, the very concept of day and night, keeping only what is essential, which is the ability to move slowly through dark water and to find, by feel alone, the microscopic particles of nutrition that the water carries to them from somewhere far above. And there is a wisdom in this paring down, this radical simplicity, that speaks to something in you tonight. Something that is ready to set aside the complexities of the day and remember that at your most essential, at your deepest and most fundamental, you are a warm body breathing in a dark room, and that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. These creatures do not know that the surface exists, do not know about sunlight or wind or the turning of seasons, and yet they are complete, fully realized beings living full lives in the only world they have ever known. And the darkness that surrounds them is not a deprivation, but an embrace. The same darkness that is now settling around you, warm and close and infinitely gentle. And if there is a lesson in their existence, it is this: that wholeness does not require knowing everything, that peace does not require understanding everything, that it is possible. It is not only possible, but natural, the most natural thing in the world, to rest deeply and completely in the midst of the unknown, to let the darkness hold you, the way the water holds these small, translucent lives, with a tenderness that asks for nothing in return. And somewhere in the deepest part of the cave, in a chamber that has never been mapped and never will be, one of these blind fish turns slowly in the current and feels the faintest vibration of the water around it, a vibration that might be the distant echo of your breathing or might be the heartbeat of the earth itself, and it adjusts its path by the smallest degree and drifts on, through the darkness, through the silence, through the vast and patient love of the stone. The sound of water changes as you settle deeper. It was a dripping before, a single note repeated, but now it has become something more complex and more soothing, a murmuring that seems to come from within the walls themselves, as though the stone is hollow and filled with rivers too small to see, rivers that flow through capillaries and fissures and hairline cracks in the limestone, carrying their mineral cargo downward in a vast interconnected network that mirrors, in its delicate complexity, the branching of roots in a forest, or veins in a leaf, or the slow forking paths of thought as the mind moves from waking toward sleep. This murmuring has a rhythm to it, though it is not a rhythm you could count or clap along to. It is more like the rhythm of breathing or of waves on a very distant shore, a rising and falling that is never quite the same twice, and yet is always recognizable, always reassuring, the way a mother's heartbeat is recognizable to a child who has never consciously heard it, but whose entire body remembers its steady, underwater percussion from the months before birth. And as you listen to this murmuring, this gentle conversation between water and stone that has been going on for longer than language has existed, you feel something in your mind begin to change. The sharp edges of thoughts grow softer. The boundaries between one idea and the next begin to blur. The urgent questions of the day, the what-ifs and the what-nows and the what-nexts, lose their edges and dissolve into the general hum of consciousness, the way individual streams dissolve into a river, losing their names but not their substance. And you realize that this is what the cave has been offering you all along. Not answers, but the recognition that not everything needs to be answered, that some questions are more beautiful as questions, the way some passages are more beautiful for remaining unenterable, and that the deepest peace comes not from resolving every uncertainty, but from learning to rest within uncertainty itself, the way the water rests within the stone, the way the darkness rests within the cave, the way the night rests upon the world, gently and without effort, held by something so large and so patient that the concept of effort has no meaning here. If you could see through stone, and tonight, in this liminal space between waking and sleeping, perhaps you can, you would see that the earth beneath you is not solid but layered, a palimpsest of former oceans and ancient forests, and the compressed remains of creatures so old that their names have been forgotten even by the rocks that hold them. And between these layers there are spaces, voids, hollows where water has dissolved the stone and left behind chambers of astonishing beauty, their walls studded with crystals that have been growing in the darkness for 100,000 years, their floors covered with formations that look like frozen waterfalls or sleeping clouds or the folds of a garment worn by some figure so vast and so still that its breathing takes centuries, and its dreams unfold on a timescale that makes human life seem like a single flash of lightning in a storm that has been raging since the continents were formed. These are the places that resist us, not with malice, never with malice, but with a patience so profound that it becomes a kind of gentleness, the way the ocean resists a swimmer, not by pushing back, but simply by being deep, by being vast, by being so much larger than the swimmer, that the question of resistance becomes irrelevant. And in place of resistance, there is only the invitation to float, to surrender weight, to let the body be held by something that has been holding things since before the concept of holding was invented. The cave knows nothing of your name, your worries, the particular shape of your life. And this anonymity is not coldness, but a kind of liberation, because here, in the deep stone, you are not required to be anything other than what you are at your most fundamental. A warm presence in the dark, a rhythm of breath and heartbeat, a temporary arrangement of the same minerals that make up the walls around you, and the same water that flows through the stone flows through you, and the same darkness that fills the chamber fills the space behind your closed eyes. And for a moment, just a moment, but a moment that stretches and expands until it fills the entire cave, there is no difference between you and the stone, between your breathing and the murmuring of the water, between your rest and the rest that the earth has been practicing since before the moon was born. A voice comes to you now, though it is not a voice exactly. It is more like a thought that arrives from outside your own mind, carried on the warm draft that flows through the narrowing passages. And it says, or rather, it suggests, in the way that the scent of rain suggests the existence of clouds, that everything that has ever worried you is very small and very far away, and that the distance between you and those worries is not measured in miles, but in layers of stone, each one older than the last, each one more patient, each one more certain, and that you would have to travel upward through all of them to reach the surface where worry lives. And that journey would take so long and require so much effort that it is not worth making tonight, not when you are so warm, so still, so deeply held by the earth's own body. The stone does not hurry, the thought continues, forming itself from the rhythm of the dripping water and the slow tidal breathing of the pools. And what the stone cannot reach in a year, it reaches in 1,000 years. And what it cannot reach in 1,000 years, it reaches in 1,000,000. And there has never been a moment in which the stone felt that it was behind, that it was late, that it should have been further along by now, because the stone understands what the surface has forgotten, that arrival is not a place, but a way of moving, and that anything moving slowly enough is already, always, exactly where it needs to be. And this thought settles into you the way sediment settles into still water, drifting downward through the layers of your consciousness until it comes to rest at the very bottom, in the place where your deepest stillness lives, and it stays there, quiet and certain, and you feel the truth of it in your bones, which are, after all, made of the same calcium that makes up the limestone walls around you, the same mineral that was once the shell of a creature floating in a warm, ancient sea. And you are, in this moment, simply that mineral dreaming that it is alive, dreaming that it is warm, dreaming that it is resting in the heart of the earth, and the dream is beautiful, and the dream is safe, and the dream goes on. The hours pass differently here, or perhaps they do not pass at all, perhaps they simply accumulate, the way layers of sediment accumulate on the floor of a still ocean, each one so thin as to be invisible, but together forming strata that tell the story of ages, and you are part of that story now. Your rest adding its own infinitesimal layer to the silence of the cave, your breathing contributing its own small rhythm to the great, slow music of water and stone that has been playing here since the beginning. The temperature has not changed. It will not change. And in this constancy, there's a permission that the surface world rarely grants, the permission to stop monitoring, stop adjusting, stop bracing yourself against shifts and variations, and instead to simply be the way the stone simply is, the way the water simply is, present and patient and perfectly content with the current moment. Because the current moment is all there has ever been down here, one long, unbroken now that stretches back to the formation of the rock itself and forward to some unimaginable future, when the mountains above will have been worn to plains and the rivers will have found new paths, and the cave will have grown new chambers and closed old ones, in the endless, unhurried conversation between water and stone that is the earth's most intimate and most enduring love story. You are a guest in this love story tonight, a brief and welcome visitor, and the cave receives you the way it receives the water, without judgment, without expectation, with the simple, open acceptance of something that has room enough for everything. And your presence here changes nothing and everything, because every drop of water that falls changes the shape of the pool it falls into, even if the change is too small to see. And your rest, your breathing, your slow surrender to sleep changes the silence of the cave in ways that only the stone will remember, adding to its vast collection of moments, a new one, small and warm and human, and the stone will hold it the way it holds everything, gently, patiently, for as long as stone endures. There is a passage here that leads deeper still, a passage so narrow that only air can travel it. And from this passage comes a warmth that speaks of spaces far below, spaces heated by the earth's own interior warmth, spaces where the rock is not cold but gentle, blood-warm, and the air that rises from these depths carries with it a humidity that feels like the breath of something sleeping, something so large that its body is the earth itself. And you realize, with a feeling that is less like understanding and more like remembering, that you are resting on the chest of this sleeping thing, rising and falling with its breath, which is so slow that a single inhalation takes 1,000 years and a single exhalation takes 1,000 more. And the pulse you feel through the stone beneath you is not your own heartbeat reflected back, but the heartbeat of the planet, the slow magmatic rhythm of a body that has been circling its star for 4.5 billion years. And in all that time, it has never once been empty, never once been barren of mystery, never once stopped creating in its hidden depths new chambers and new passages and new pools of water so pure and so still that they are less like water and more like liquid silence. And you are part of this creation, not separate from it, not observing it from the outside, but woven into it the way a thread is woven into a tapestry. Your brief life, a single stitch in a pattern so vast that it can only be seen from very far away, from the perspective of deep time. And from that perspective, your life is not brief at all, but part of something continuous and unbroken, a single expression of the same impulse that causes crystals to grow in the dark and water to find its way through stone, the impulse toward form, toward pattern, toward the quiet, persistent creation of beauty in places where no one is watching. And this knowledge, settling over you like a blanket woven from the dark itself, carries with it a peace so complete that it does not need to be named, a peace that exists below the level of language, below the level of thought, in the place where your body meets the earth and the two become, for a little while, indistinguishable. The water in the deepest pools is very old, older than the languages spoken on the surface above, older than the nations and the cities, older than the names we have given to the mountains and the rivers and the stars, and it carries within it a record of the world as it was before any of these names existed, a chemical memory of rains that fell on landscapes we would not recognize, filtered through stone that has since been compressed and folded and lifted and worn away and compressed again in the slow, dreaming metabolism of the earth's crust. If you were to taste this water, and in this borderland between waking and sleep, you can imagine tasting it, cool and faintly mineral on your tongue, you would taste something that is beyond flavor, something that is more like time itself made liquid, and it would not quench your thirst so much as remind you that thirst is a kind of belonging, the body's way of announcing its kinship with every river and every ocean and every drop of rain that has ever fallen, and that you are, at the molecular level, mostly water yourself, and that the water inside you and the water inside the cave are not different waters but the same water, circulating through different vessels, passing through stone and through you and through the clouds and through the sea in one vast, unbroken cycle that has been turning since the atmosphere first condensed from steam. And that when you sleep tonight, your body will do what water does. It will rest, it will settle, it will find its level. And in the morning it will rise again, as water rises from the sea to become clouds, carrying with it the minerals and the memories of the deep places where it rested. And this rising will feel effortless because it is effortless, because it is what water does, what life does, what you do, and the cave knows this, and the stone knows this, and the darkness knows this, and they are holding you now the way the riverbed holds the river, not by grasping, but simply by being shaped over millennia into exactly the right form to receive exactly this flow. And you are flowing now, aren't you? Flowing away from the sharp, bright surface of waking life and down into the deep, warm currents of sleep, and the cave is flowing with you, its passages curving downward in spirals that echo the spirals of shells and galaxies and the slow, turning descent of autumn leaves through still air. And together, you are going somewhere that has no name and needs no name, a place that exists at the bottom of every night and the center of every stone, where everything is held and nothing is lost, and the silence is so deep and so complete that it becomes, at last, indistinguishable from love. There are formations here that have been building themselves in the darkness for 100,000 years, stalactites descending from the ceiling with the patience of glaciers, each one a frozen cascade of mineral deposited by water so slowly that the growth is measured not in inches per year but in inches per century. And their surfaces are smooth and cool to the touch, ridged with the faintest concentric bands that mark not seasons, but ages. And if you were to run your finger along the length of one, you would be touching time itself, made solid, made tangible, made into something you can feel beneath your fingertip. And the sensation would be like reading a book written in a language older than any human alphabet, a language of mineral and moisture and the quiet accumulative power of repetition. Stalagmites rise from the floor to meet them, growing upward with the same impossible patience. And in some places, the two have met and fused, forming columns that span the entire height of the chamber, like the pillars of a temple built by no one for no purpose other than the pure, purposeless beauty of becoming. And in the spaces between these columns, the air is very still and very warm, and carries a humidity that feels like the breath of the earth itself. And standing among them, you would feel less like you were inside a cave, and more like you were inside a living body, surrounded by structures that are growing and changing and slowly, endlessly creating themselves out of the simplest possible materials: water, stone, gravity, and time. This is what the earth does when no one is watching. It builds cathedrals in the dark, decorates them with crystals and flowstone and rimstone pools that overflow with water so clear it looks like air. And it does this not for an audience, but because creation is the earth's nature. The way breathing is your nature, something that happens whether you intend it or not, something that continues even in sleep, especially in sleep. And as you feel your own breathing slow and deepen, you are participating in this creation, your exhalations adding their tiny cargo of moisture to the air of the cave, moisture that will eventually find its way to a surface of stone and begin, in its own microscopic way, the process of building, of depositing, of contributing to a structure that will not be complete for another 100,000 years. And there is something wonderfully absurd and wonderfully beautiful about this. The idea that your breath tonight might become, over millennia, part of the architecture of a place you will never see, a tiny crystalline layer in a stalactite that will go on growing long after your name has been forgotten, and that this forgetting is not sad but peaceful, because it means that you are part of something so much larger and so much longer than a single life, that the boundaries of a single life become, from this perspective, not confining but irrelevant, the way the boundaries of a single wave are irrelevant to the ocean. Let the thought dissolve now, the way the limestone dissolves under the patient action of water, slowly, gently, one particle at a time, until what was solid becomes liquid, and what was fixed becomes flowing. And the thoughts you carried down here with you from the surface are dissolving too, losing their sharp edges, losing their urgency, losing their claim on your attention, drifting apart like clouds viewed from below. And between them, you can see the vast, dark sky of your own interior. Silence. And it is very large, much larger than you realized, and it has been here all along, waiting for the clouds to part, waiting for the thoughts to thin, waiting for this moment when you are quiet enough and still enough to notice it. The dripping continues, that single, perfect, endlessly repeated note. And with each drop, you feel yourself dissolving a little further, not into nothingness, but into the larger rhythm of the cave, The way a musician dissolves into the music when the performance reaches the point where the player and the instrument and the song are no longer separate things but a single flowing expression of something that existed before any of them and will exist after all of them have gone. Your breathing is the cave's breathing now. Your heartbeat is the heartbeat of the water moving through the stone. Your rest is the rest of the earth itself, which has been resting and creating in an alternation so slow and so vast that the difference between rest and creation disappears. And what remains is simply this: the presence of being, warm and dark and quietly alive, asking nothing, answering nothing, simply going on, the way the cave goes on, the way the stone goes on, the way the water goes on, the way the darkness goes on, in the deep, held, infinite peace of things that have never needed a reason to exist. And far below, always deeper than you have gone, always one more chamber, one more passage, one more narrowing and widening and narrowing again. The earth keeps its deepest secrets in rooms that have never known light and never will. Rooms where the silence is so absolute that sound itself has forgotten how to exist. Rooms where the temperature has been the same since before the ice ages, came and went and came again. Rooms where crystals larger than trees grow in the darkness with a patience that makes the lifespan of mountains seem hurried, their surfaces catching no light because there is no light to catch. Their beauty existing entirely for itself, witnessed by nothing, appreciated by nothing, and yet as real and as magnificent as any sunset or any symphony, and perhaps more so because a sunset asks to be watched and a symphony asks to be heard. But a crystal, growing in absolute darkness, asks nothing, needs nothing, simply becomes moment by moment, atom by atom. And what it was always going to become, and in this complete self-sufficiency, there is a model for the deepest kind of peace. The peace of something that is entirely itself, entirely at rest within its own nature, and that has been this way for so long that the concept of being otherwise has never arisen. And you, tonight, resting in the chamber that the cave has offered you, are approaching this peace, approaching it the way the water approaches the pool, slowly and with a kind of inevitability that feels less like choosing and more like being chosen. And the peace is not something you need to create or achieve or earn, but something you need only to stop resisting, the way the stone stops resisting the water.